So one hair just not working. Hello! Welcome back. So we've broken down material, weathered. Now we're creating this sediment and those different types. Now that sediment's got to move and be deposited somewhere. So now that's what we're going to talk about. So when we move sediment, the movement of sediment, that's called erosion. And erosion can cause transportation by wind, water, ice, or gravity, sometimes known as mass wasting. Think of dust storms. If you live here in the Phoenix area, you well know how wind can blow dust around, how water can move sediment around, whether it's waves, rivers, streams. Ice, glaciers, as they flow, all that black material you see on top of these glaciers is all sediment. And then gravity. There's gravity pulling stuff down. Stuff falls. That once that breaks off, weathers from the larger rock face itself, it now becomes sediment. So sediment, it stops, it settles when its speed decreases. So when the wind slows down, when the water movement slows down, when the ice slows down or stops, when it falls after it tumbles, when it slows down to a stop, it settles when its speed decreases. Now, where does it settle can be kind of broken down into two bigger environments, whether on land or on or near the ocean. So we'll treat both of those separately. Before we do, I'm going to give you another part of the super secret code. It is the number 3. You got me? The number 3. One more time, number 3. So we'll treat the land environment different than near or on the ocean environment. So we'll talk about land as a depositional environment first. So there's 4 main locations on land where sediment gets deposited. At the margin or edges of glaciers, in and around lakes, in and around streams, and wherever wind blows strongly and intermittently, sometimes known as aeolian environments. So glaciers, as they carve down through rocks and mountains and valleys, ice is pretty strong. You can break it up and move that material almost like a bulldozer right to the end of the glacier. So all of this material here has been deposited by glaciers, so ice. Again, at the end of this glacier, you see all this deposited sediment. Again, at the end of this glacier, you see all this deposited sediment. So that's one environment on land where sediment is deposited. Lakes. So in lakes, you can see that sediment here will eventually settle to the bottom of a lake. Lakes typically still water. For some reason, dirt gets blown in there. It'll just kind of settle to the bottom. Streams. Streams, on the sides, on the bottom, at the ends of streams, you typically have larger pieces of sediment. The smaller pieces of sediment will kind of continue to flow down. Larger pieces will make their way off to the sides. So stream locations. And then aeolian environments, windy areas where large amounts of sediment is deposited, like in these sand dunes at the base of these mountains. So this would be known as an aeolian environment. So that's where you're going to find sediment kind of deposited, collected in certain areas. There are some cool land features that deposited sediment can create. That we talk about in a geologic sense. One being a delta. So deltas kind of have a fan shaped. They form when a moving stream enters a still body of water. So when some sort of river kind of enters into some sort of lake. So you get a river which moves fast hitting a lake which doesn't move very much. That water containing the sediment slows down. When sediment slows down, it's deposited. So that's kind of how you get these delta formations. So that's one land-based landform from sediment deposition. A very similar looking depositional feature is something called an alluvial fan. Different than a delta. This is when flowing water creates this fan-shaped deposition, but when a moving stream enters flat, dry area, like hits a flat valley floor or hits a playa, which we'll talk about a little bit later. No longer constrained by some sort of channel or valley up in the mountains, the stream kind of spreads out, kind of goes in every direction, depositing that sediment, because again, once that water hits the flat valley floor, it slows down. When it slows down, any sediment in that water will be deposited out. Very common in desert areas, Arizona included. Here's an image of Death Valley, and you can see a bunch of alluvial fans all along the edge of this mountain range as it kind of flows into the Death Valley floor. And then you also get something called a playa, or sometimes a playa lake. Not playa, playa. They're very flat. These are dry, seasonal lake beds that form in arid regions, like deserts, arid meaning dry. They may have standing water part of the year, but that water evaporates away. So whether the water falls directly on the playa, or if you like seeing this image, water falls in the mountains or snow melt, kind of washes down to this flat area, bringing with the sediment. The water evaporates away, deposits the sediment. So this is a land depositional feature, this playa. And they're very, very flat. So flat, sometimes they have auto races on these playas because they're just so flat. You can just race without any worries of any bumps or anything like that. One cool, famous playa in Death Valley is the Racetrack Playa in Death Valley National Park. And what's cool about the Racetrack Playa is that on this playa, rocks move all on their own. What? Rocks move all on their own? Rocks move all on their own. They carve these cool little paths to indicate the direction in kind of which they travel, but rocks move all on their own. I'll let you investigate as to why. Not necessary for this class, but if you're interested, look it up. So that's land depositional features, features and depositional areas. And then you also have the oceanic depositional environment. In or near the ocean is also a depositional environment. We distinguish that from land. Four main locations include the shore, a place called an estuary, the shallow ocean, and the deep ocean. So shore, as a place where sediment is deposited, should be familiar to most people. It's a beach, right? Along the beach we have sand. Sand is a sediment deposited here from wave action pushing material up, or sometimes water streams coming out of the surrounding areas. An estuary is an area of where freshwater stream kind of mixes with the salt water of an ocean. So it's kind of this mix of fresh and salt water, and it's called an estuary. And sediment can be deposited either from the stream or from the ocean. Birds love estuaries. That's what I know of estuaries. And then you have the shallow parts of an ocean. So as a stream runs off the land, it will deposit sediment in the shallow parts of the ocean on the continental shelf. That's the kind of edges of the continent. So the continental shelf. This is important to know. I'm going to move me here. Most of the world's sediment and sedimentary rocks, therefore, form as layers on continental shelves in the shallow parts of the ocean. You got me? The shallow parts of the ocean. Did you hear me? Shallow parts of the ocean. So when you're looking at a sedimentary rock on land, you're looking at the Grand Canyon. All those layers of the Grand Canyon are sedimentary rocks. Well, sedimentary rocks, the vast majority of them form from sediment that's been deposited in the shallow ocean. So if you're looking at sedimentary rocks, sandstones, shales, things of this nature, which we'll look at in lab, those form in the shallow parts of the ocean. Therefore, areas with those rocks must have been under the ocean. So that's a good indication of how geology tells a story. So therefore, you know, parts of Arizona have been under an ocean. So we get the shallow parts of the ocean where sediment is deposited, right there. And then you also have the deeper parts of the ocean where sediment gets deposited. That's another area. Sometimes sediments makes a way out there, or a lot of times the deep ocean sediments come from dead material, typically dying, falling to the bottom, building up layers. So we're going to pause there. When we come back, now we've talked about sediment, where it gets deposited. Now we're going to talk about how sediment becomes sedimentary rocks. I'll see you back here in just a second.